Hey guys, tonight we're not drifting off to gentle harp music or cozy ancient libraries. No, tonight you're crouched in a trench, ankle-deep in mud that smells faintly like rust and something worse. You're listening not to lullabies, but to distant explosions and the dull thunk of boots in the dark. You adjust your helmet. You check your rifle. You stare at the black sky like it might blink first. This is World War II, and sleep. Sleep is a luxury for someone who doesn't flinch at the sound of breathing. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing who else is listening in the stillness. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through trenches that weren't dug as much as they were clawed out of the earth in a panic, narrow, snaking like the gut of some buried beast. These trenches don't just carry soldiers, they carry everything. Fear, hope, and yes, the occasional chicken that wandered too far from the French countryside. But don't get romantic. The air is cold, thick with the kind of damp that sticks to your soul. Somewhere up the line, a flare goes up, white light, tearing across the night like a god's flashlight, and every head ducks. You duck too. Instinct, because the second rule of trench life is, never let them see your silhouette. The first rule: don't ever believe the trenches go quiet. They don't. Even when the guns stop, there's always something. A boot squishing in soaked earth. A whisper, sometimes a prayer, sometimes a threat. The clatter of a helmet knocked loose by a trembling hand. And rats, always rats. They know this place better than you ever will. You hear them tonight, big, brazen ones. The kind that don't even bother running anymore. One scurries past your knee. You flinch. Your rifle's too heavy to swat with. He's gone anyway, probably off to nibble some poor guy's rations. Or face. Historians still argue whether rats truly grew that bold, but you've seen things. This trench isn't on any travel brochure. No postcards here, just wooden planks. Laid down in a pit, supposed to stop your boots from rotting. Joke's on you. You haven't felt your toes since Tuesday. Behind you, someone groans, not wounded, just fed up. He mutters something about Jerry's damned machine guns, and tries to adjust the canvas tarp over the trench. It sags with rainwater. He gives up. You both laugh a little. It's not funny, but it's either that or cry, and crying just makes your face colder. A shell lands in the distance. You feel it more than hear it. The earth shifts beneath your boots like a breathing thing. You tighten your grip on the rifle. Your buddy mutters, "Close one." You nod, but that wasn't close. You've had close. A few nights ago, you watched the guy 2 trenches down get vaporized while reaching for his dropped spoon. A clean hit. No scream, just ... Gone. Someone else took the spoon. This is your bedtime now. Not tucked in sheets, but burlap sacks and tension. You sleep sitting up, if at all, because lying down invites water, rats, and snipers. Your helmet doubles as a pillow, and your coat as a blanket. Cozy, right? Sometimes you dream. You dream of your mother's kitchen, of the smell of warm bread and sun through windows. Sometimes the dream tricks you, and the window becomes a flashbang. The bread smells like gunpowder, and your mother's voice is screaming someone else's name. Even in REM, you're on the front. Someone passes by, stepping over you. Their face is smudged, hollow-eyed. Might be an officer, might be a ghost. You don't ask. If you have to ask, you're too awake. Your buddy next to you lights a cigarette. The flame flares too bright, too long. You slap it out of his hand. He swears, calls you something you won't repeat. You shrug, better angry than dead. He knows. You both know. You remember the briefing. This sector is quiet. Quiet means they haven't shelled it in an hour. Quiet means you only lost 1 man this morning. Sometimes you try to count how long you've gone without proper sleep. But the days blur. You dream with your eyes open now. Micronaps between barrages. 30 seconds here, a blink there. Enough to hallucinate a cat that doesn't exist. You name it, Greg. Greg, the ghost cat. He guards your soup. The moon appears, silver and disinterested. It doesn't care if you're winning. It doesn't even care who you're shooting at. You wonder if the guys across no man's land are staring at the same moon. Probably are. Probably. Freezing too, one of your squad mates hums a lullaby. It's the wrong one, too cheery to pre-war. But he keeps going. Maybe it's for his kid. Maybe it's for you. A corporal stumbles through, boots squelching. He drops down next to you, breathless. Orders changed, he mutters. Push at dawn. You nod. You don't even flinch anymore. Push at dawn means no sleep tonight. Again. You run your tongue along your teeth. Taste iron. Or is it blood? Hard to say. You adjust your coat. The rat's back. You let him stay this time. Maybe he's cold too. You try to shift your weight in the trench, but it's like moving inside a soggy coffin. Everything sticks. Your boots, your coat, your skin to your undershirt. There's a new, sickening squelch every time someone nearby shifts, even slightly. The floor of the trench isn't floor at all, it's a paste of mud, blood, soup, and something that might once have been a sock. If you're lucky, it's not yours. You reach for your rations. Not because your hungry hunger stopped being a sharp feeling days ago. Because chewing something gives your jaw something to do, besides tremble. The tin creaks open with a sound louder than a grenade, or at least that's how it feels. In the stillness, inside, is your prize. Gray-brown meat, technically. Maybe it's corned beef. Maybe it's sadness. You tear at it with your teeth and immediately regret it. It's cold, metallic, and chewy in a way that says, this cow died. Reluctantly still, you chew. It's a habit now, like breathing, like fear. Then come the rats. You hear them first, of course. The little squeals and pitter-pats of furry opportunists. They're not scared of you. Why would they be? You're just a warm pile of stillness holding edible things. One skitters up beside your boot and boldly eyes your tin. You eye him back. There's a brief Mexican standoff until he wins, obviously. You flick a finger toward him. He flinches, but doesn't run. A second one joins, then a third. You could swear they're coordinating. Your buddy across the trench mutters name. That one, General Patton. He's got strategy. Historians still argue whether trench rats in World War II were as massive and fearless as described in soldiers' journals, or whether fear, hunger, and delirium just made them seem that way. But right now, you could swear one just winked at you. You toss a crumb down the trench, and the pack rushes it. Victory is fleeting. You cover your tin and try to ignore the twitch of whiskers beside your thigh. You can't sleep with rats crawling over your boots, but worse, you can't not sleep. Your brain is cracking like a frozen lake. You nod off in jerks. 1 second you're awake. The next you're seeing your sister's wedding cake explode into shrapnel and screaming icing. Your head lolls. You jerk back awake. The rations fall. Into the muck, a rat celebrates. You let him have it. The worst part isn't the rats. It's the nausea. That constant queasiness that curls in your gut and rises to your throat like bad soup. Which, incidentally, is also what dinner smelled like. Every soldier has a theory on what causes it. The water, the nerves, the rations, the sheer tension of never being fully awake or fully asleep. You remember what the medic said yesterday: eat slow. Chew long, breathe through your nose. He then proceeded to vomit into a bucket, while telling someone else the same thing. Good man, probably. You hope he lives. You lean back against the trench wall. It's slightly warmer there, probably because of the insulation layer of ancient sweat and desperation. The smell is layered, earthy, human, slightly pickled. You sniff your sleeve. Mistake. Behind you, someone retches, not quietly. It's a dry heave, followed by a choked sob. You know the pattern. No one's even poisoned, it's just his body saying, I've had enough of this war. You toss him a canteen. He nods in the darkness. No words. What's the point? You used to sleep through storms back home. Real ones. Thunder cracking like the sky was tearing open. Rain hammering the tin roof of your parents' house. But here, even silence is suspicious. Every quiet moment is a prelude to noise, the kind that kills. There was that time 2 nights ago when everything was still, for half an hour, and you thought, just maybe, you'd get some rest. Then the guy 2 spots down screamed in his sleep and grabbed a grenade. It didn't go off. Lucky for him, unlucky for your nerves. He apologized. You said, "No worries." You meant, "I might never sleep again." And then there's the coughing. Tuberculosis, trench cough, smoke inhalation, it all sounds the same at 3:27 a.m. You can't tell if the guy next to you is dying or just remembering the wrong moment. You pull your scarf higher, as if fabric can stop microbes or memories. You shift again, and your boot sinks deeper. There's something squishy under it. You don't check. Better not to know. The latrines are a whole other nightmare. Technically, they're away from the trenches. Practically, they're a 10-minute hike through what might as well be Mordor. You gave up on using them 3 days ago. You're not proud. But you're not alone either. Your friend Spoons made the trip earlier and hasn't come back yet. Either he got lost, or someone finally got fed up with that harmonica he always played at dinner. You never liked Twinkle Twinkle that much anyway. You fish through your pocket. 1/2 of a chocolate bar. A true miracle. You break off a square and let it melt slowly in your mouth. Sweetness, real sweetness. You forget where you are for about 4 seconds. Then someone nearby farts audibly. The moment's gone. You can't remember the last time you took your boots off. That's not a joke. You literally don't remember. Someone once said that soldiers who remove their boots during trench warfare tend to lose their feet. Something about the blood not wanting to come back once it's tasted freedom. Historians disagree. Some say it was trench foot prevention. Others say it was just superstition. You don't care. You're not taking the chance. Your boots are part of you now. You might be buried in them. You check your watch. Or what's left of it. The crystals. Cracked and the hands tremble. For 41, you've got 2 hours until the push. You close your eyes, just for a second. Maybe sleep will sneak up on you. But at dose in single quotes, instead you hear it, the unmistakable crunch of boots on the duckboards. Someone's coming. And the rats scatter like they know what that means. You don't need to look. You already know what's coming. The boots stop just short of your corner. A silhouette blocks the pale sliver of moonlight peeking over the trench wall. You hear the heavy breath of someone who's run too hard, or smoked too much, or maybe both. Then comes the whisper, low and grim. Incoming. You brace yourself. The night doesn't wait. It explodes. First the distant whine, soft and high, like the screech of an invisible banshee tearing through the clouds. Then the whistle dips low, too fast. You suck in air. Your lungs tighten. Everyone in the trench ducks simultaneously, as if choreographed by fear. The shell hits somewhere down the line. You feel it in your ribs before you hear the blast. The ground jumps. A scream cuts through the night like a snapped violin string. You don't look. If it was someone you knew, they're not that person anymore. Another shell screams overhead, and another. Now it's not just a hit, it's a barrage. Artillery fire rips through the silence with methodical cruelty. A rhythm of death. The sky flashes orange, then green, like a demented fireworks show. Only no one's cheering here. You clamp your hands over your ears, but it doesn't help. Sound travels through bones in war. Your jaw vibrates. Your teeth ache. You feel like your brain is pulsing in time with the shells. There's no time to think. You dive into a tighter corner of the trench, hunching low, trying to shrink into the earth. Dirt rains from above with every hit. A chunk of something wet and heavy lands on your shoulder. You flick it off without looking. Survival first. Sanity. Second. Artillery becomes your lullaby now. Not the soothing kind. The other kind, the one where lullabies are played in reverse. Backward, through cracked speakers, whispering in a language that forgot kindness. The officer shouts something over the din. You can't hear. Doesn't matter. Orders are smoke during a shelling. You see someone praying, lips moving fast. Might be Latin, might be gibberish. The chaplain's been gone for days. Probably buried with the last mortar crew. You told yourself once you'd write down all the names. You don't even remember your own handwriting anymore. Historians often debate. whether nighttime shelling was more psychological warfare or just poor planning. From where you're lying, face pressed into mud, heart thudding in your ears. Say it's both. Eventually, the pace slows. The barrage eases from full thunderstorm to drizzle. Not quiet, just less insane. You rise halfway, blinking grit out of your eyes. All you see are shapes. Human ones. Or used to be. You step over something that used to breathe. You don't dwell. Your buddy leans in, says through cracked lips, "They always hit after rations." It's like they know. You nod. That half-eaten meat tin is now somewhere out there, possibly embedded in a crater. The rats will be thrilled. Now comes the skyfire. Flare shells. Bright, lingering orbs that float above the battlefield like dying suns. They turn the night into a pale, washed-out day. The shadows stretch long and wrong. Your depth perception goes sideways. Everything looks fake, like a theater set painted in blood. It's worse than pitch black. At least in the dark, you can pretend no one's aiming. You flatten against the wall, watching the sky burn. Someone runs past, clutching something to their chest. Could be a weapon. Could be a friend. Could be a doll, for all you know. The flare light makes everyone look like ghosts wearing uniforms. A body jerks and collapses nearby. No scream, just the quiet slap of a bag of bones hitting soaked canvas. You hear a muttered curse. Not sorrow, just annoyance. You're all too tired for grief tonight. You catch yourself swaying, not from impact, but fatigue. Your body wants sleep so badly, it's trying to pass out standing. You slap your cheek, hard. It barely registers. If you sleep now, you might never wake. There's a superstition in the ranks. The louder the sky, the closer the dead. Some swear the shriek of artillery is their howling. Others think it's the world cracking open you. You think it's just one more reason you'll never sleep like a normal human again. You glance upward. The flare finally dies. The darkness rushes back, in like breath after drowning. You want to savor it, but the moment's already stolen by footsteps, more boots, more rushing. A runner barely 19 collapses into the trench beside you. His eyes are wild. He tries to speak. Can't. Just holds up a soggy note. You take it, unfold it, read, in moonlight. Hold position. Reinforcements delayed. You look at the kid. He's shaking so hard, he drops his rifle. His lips are blue. You give him your last scrap of dry cloth to wrap his hands. He nods, but it doesn't help. He's already slipping into some place behind his eyes. That space you go when you stop believing this war will ever end. Historians still argue whether teenage runners were more liability or necessity. Tonight, he's just another boy, will forget his own name before the sun comes up. Someone behind you lights a cigarette again. This time, you let them. The flare's already blown your cover. Might as well die with a smoke, and then quiet. Not peace. Just a gap. You listen to the air itself, strained, like it's afraid to breathe. No shells, no flares. Just drizzle, pattering. On your helmet, and the gentle clink of someone reloading, mechanically, like brushing teeth. You lower yourself into the trench wall again, exhausted beyond sense. You close your eyes. Boom. One last shell. The sky reopens. You stay awake this time. The guy with the cigarette. He's your sergeant. Technically, nobody's really saluting in the trenches anymore. Authority is based less on rank these days, and more on who still has all 10 fingers and enough sanity to count them. His name's Wallace, but no one calls him that. Around here, he's just Sarge. And his legend isn't in medals or speeches, it's in the fact that no one has ever seen him sleep. Not once. You've watched him sit motionless for hours, perched at the edge of the trench with his rifle, resting across his knees like a priest with a sermon. Smoke curls from his lips like it's scared to leave too fast. His eyes, open always, watching like the war itself is reporting to him. Tonight, he's sipping from a battered tin mug. You know it holds the same thick, black coffee he's somehow managed to brew every night, no matter the conditions. Mud, gunpowder, gas warnings, doesn't matter. The man finds water, heat, and a bean, every time. You're convinced he's made a blood pact with the caffeine gods. Don't even think about sleeping. he says without looking at you. That's how you miss dying. You try to laugh, but it comes out as a cough. Thought that's how you get dying. He finally glances at you, just for a second. One eye twitch. It's the ones who sleep, who scream first. You go quiet, because he's right. You've heard them. The ones who think they're safe enough to catch an hour, maybe even two. They start out mumbling just names, places, harmless little memories, but then something in their brain decides to replay the things no one should ever replay. You've watched a man claw at his own neck, convinced he's still choking on gas from a battle 3 months ago. Another guy dug with his bare hands, dreaming he was still trying to save a friend already gone. One guy laughed in his sleep until he didn't. He never woke up. Sarge doesn't sleep because he knows what dreams are made of. Historians still argue whether true combat-induced insomnia was as widespread as claimed, or a convenient myth born from bravado. You don't need a debate. You've got Sarge living proof that some eyes just forget how to close. He sips again and mutters, "Mine's like a foxhole. Leave it unguarded, and something crawls in." You wonder what crawled into his dot behind him. Private Langley stirs in his corner, twitching violently. His breath's ragged, limbs spasming like he's trying to run. Someone leans over to shake him awake, but Sarge holds out a hand. "No," he growls. "Let it burn through. Better here than under fire." You watch Langley wrestle his invisible enemy. His face is wet. Maybe sweat, maybe tears. When he finally snaps awake, gasping, he looks 10 years older, doesn't say a word, just stares at the wall. You hand him your canteen. He doesn't drink. The trench feels tighter now, like the air itself is thick with fatigue. Your body wants sleep so badly it's starting to compromise with hallucination. You see shapes in the dark that flicker in and out of focus. Movement at the corners of your vision. The shadows seem to whisper names. You blink hard. Still there, Sarge, unfazed, begins cleaning his rifle. It's the 4th time tonight. Not because it needs it. He just needs something to do. You realize that's his real secret. Not just caffeine, but motion, ritual, a tiny war within the big one. He sets the bolt aside carefully and runs a cloth through the barrel. You could set your watch by the rhythm if your watch hadn't drowned 3 weeks ago. Once, he told a story. Just one, about a foxhole in Italy. Said he dug it himself, then shared it with a guy from Wisconsin named Petey. Petey snored like a dying cow. But Sarge didn't care. That was the last time he slept. A mortar landed dead center in their hole. Petey went up in pieces. Sarge went sideways. Since then, no sleep. Not even a nap. Some people say he's lucky. Others think he's cursed. Personally, you're not sure there's a difference anymore. A gust of wind slips through the trench and sends the canvas flapping. Somewhere, something metal clinks. Sarge doesn't flinch. He just finishes reassembling his rifle and sets it down like a parent tucking in a child. "You sleep," he mutters. "You start dreaming of peace." He says it like a curse. Then he lights another cigarette. You ask him, "Don't you ever get tired?" He doesn't answer, just exhales. You wonder if he's afraid that if he closes his eyes, he'll wake up back in that foxhole. With Petey, with the sound of bones cracking under fire, with the smell of cooking hair and wet wool. You think about how that must feel, to live in one long, stretched-out second for years. To never hit pause. To always be halfway between now and then. The sound of distant gunfire snaps you both back, to the present. Not close, not far. But enough to remind you peace is fiction. Sarge grinds out the butt of his cigarette in the trench wall. Then stands, bones creaking like old wood. He checks his pockets, his gear, his men. Everything in place. Everything accounted for. He looks at you one last time. "You'll sleep when you're dead," he says. "Maybe." Then he walks off into the fog, and you realize that somehow, you feel safer with him awake even, if he's the most haunted man alive. You're leaning against the trench wall again, half slumped like a scarecrow someone gave up building. The back of your neck is stiff, your eyes itch like they're filled with powdered chalk, and your knees have forgotten what's standing properly. Feels like somewhere overhead, a bird sings. A single, confused Suicidal bird. And that's how you know it's nearly dawn. Time to get moving. You yank yourself upright. Bones creaking like an old barn door. Your boots protest. Not audibly, but you can feel their resentment. They're soaked through. Ganond, the laces are crusted with a mystery substance. You stopped questioning 3 days ago. This morning, like every morning, you perform the ritual. Check rifle, adjust helmet, tighten belt. Then the part you dread most, the boot check. You wiggle your toes inside the swamp that lives at the bottom of your footwear. Still attached, still numb, still yours. You think about taking one off, just to air it out, just to feel something that isn't trench filth, bacteria stew, or invisible. Fungal rage. You don't. Because the rule is simple. Once the boot comes off, it might never go back on. Trench foot, the silent predator. It doesn't make a sound, doesn't cause a scream. It just sets in, eats away quietly, and turns men's toes into something resembling peeled grapes. Historians estimate nearly 75,000 Allied soldiers suffered from trench foot during World War II. Some recovered. Most limped into Legendor, into the nearest amputation tent. You remember what the medic said last week. If your foot smells like death before you die, congratulations, you've got it. You hadn't laughed. But the medic had. That was concerning. Still standing, you try to stretch. Bad move. Something in your lower back makes a noise like bubble wrap popping. You grimace. A few heads turn. You nod at them. The universal soldier. Gesture for, yep, still here. Barely you reach for your helmet, nestled at your side like a tired dog. It's dented again. You don't even remember when that happened. Could have been yesterday. Could have been a dream. You fit it on your head with the familiarity of a man putting on a mask. Someone behind you mutters, better keep one boot. On you turn. It's Renier, trenchmate, foxhole neighbor, and the unofficial philosopher of the platoon. Why just one? You ask. 'Cause if you die, at least they'll know you tried. You both chuckle. A light papery thing that vanishes in the breeze like cigarette ash. Besides, he adds, the guy who took both off last week didn't even make it to breakfast. You nod. There it is again. The superstition of the single boot. Not quite science. Not quite madness. Somewhere in between. Fringe stories swirl around the platoon like folklore. One man swears his foot grew back better after trench foot. Another claims the Germans dropped anti-boot powder in the mud. One guy tried wrapping his feet in bacon fat. He got trench foot anyway. He also got eaten by rats. Fringe or not, you keep your boots on. Your socks, though, are staging a rebellion. Every step you take feels like sandpaper kissing your arches. But you endure, because changing socks requires taking off boots. And we've already covered that deadly sin. As the sky lightens pale gray, bleeding into dull blue, begin the march, not the dramatic kind. There's no music, no flags, just the squeak of boots on duckboards, the grunt of gear shifting on shoulders, and the occasional whisper, careful, ice. You walk in line, one after another, all of you sharing a single expression. Don't think, just move. Your legs know the drill. Your mind is elsewhere, remembering home, rerunning last night's near miss, or just plain blank. You see Rennie stumble ahead. He catches himself. You okay? You ask. Yeah, he pants. Just the mud grabbed my foot, like a jealous ex. You grin. That earns a tired laugh from someone behind you. Humor's a currency, here more valuable than ammo, more effective than orders. A good joke can delay a breakdown by at least 5 minutes. Then it happens. Your boot sinks fast, deep not both. Just one. The left it disappears past the ankle, past the calf, your knee, barely spared. You freeze. Arms flail. You try to pull back. The boot holds on like it's in love. Rennie grabs your arm, heaves. Don't fight it. Wiggle. You do. Left, right, left, like a twisted dance. With one final yank, your leg comes loose, boot, miraculously, intact. You gasp, heart pounding, leg burning. He smirks. Told you. That mud's clingy. You want to say thanks. But instead, you mutter something about naming the mud after your ex-girlfriend. Rennie approves. You keep walking, shaken but intact. Mostly by the time you reach the forward station, the sun's just barely peeking over the ridge. Golden light spills onto the dirt, like someone spilled their morning tea across the sky. It'd be beautiful if you weren't surrounded by sandbags, flies, and the unmistakable scent of burnt cordite. A supply officer waves you over here. He grunts, tossing something small into your hands. New socks. You stare. Real socks. Dry ones. Wool. A miracle. You blink at him. Can I? He cuts you off. Not here. Wait till you're off duty, unless you want gangrene for breakfast. You nod solemnly and tuck the socks into your inner coat pocket like they're a love letter from God. Maybe you will change them later. One at a time, in private, in silence, like a ceremony. Until then, the boots stay on. Because when you're this deep in it, when the ground beneath your feet might swallow you whole, sleep is dangerous. But so is comfort. And both start with taking off your boots. The whisper of jungle leaves above you doesn't mask the sharper, more sinister hissing that follows you wherever you move. You crouch low, motionless, and blink against the sweat dripping into your eyes. This isn't Europe. This isn't even recognizable terrain. You're somewhere in the Pacific, where the ground breathes steam and the trees feel like they're watching. Here, sleep is suicide. You learn that quickly. The first night, a guy named Fisher, lanky, nervous, always writing letters, closes his eyes for what he says will be just a moment. In the time it takes for one mosquito to pierce your sock, he's gone. No sound, no scream, just gone. The jungle takes in silence. This isn't like the front lines in France. You're not just dealing with bullets and shells. No, here it's rot and spores and snakes that drop like death from overhead branches. Even your boots grow mold overnight. You feel it. The land is alive, but not in a friendly, National Geographic way. It wants you to leave, or lie down, and rot. Your sergeant tells you stories before dusk, not to entertain, but to warn. In Burma, he says, they thought the ghost of a Japanese scout haunted the ridge. No one who slept alone ever came back. He smiles when he says it, but the next night, he assigns double sentries. Just in case. You start hearing things. Jungle sounds aren't just sounds. They're codes. A chirp that comes 3 times in the same pitch, probably a bird, for chirps in a broken rhythm. Might be a Japanese sniper, using bird mimicry. It happened in Guadalcanal. You lie in your hammock, clenching your jaw, trying to memorize every forest rhythm, so you don't get tricked by the wrong kind of tweet. Historians still argue whether American and Japanese soldiers used animal mimicry intentionally, or if it was a psychological projection of fear. Either way, when you hear a monkey's whoop too close, you grip your rifle like it's the last warm thing on earth. Sleep deprivation becomes the air you breathe. You're so tired your brain starts editing reality. One night, you see your mother brushing her hair at the edge of the jungle. Another time, a vending machine in the jungle. You laugh out loud and wake the guy next to you. He nearly shoots you in the face. You both agree not to speak of it again. And then there are the bugs. You're not talking about a few gnats here. You're talking about beetles the size of silver dollars, ants that swarm like dark water, and spiders so big they don't scurry. They stride. A centipede gets into someone's tent, and the scream echoes for hours. Not because he was bitten, but because it crawled into his ear while he slept and wouldn't come out. You try netting. You try dousing yourself in repellent that smells like melted plastic. One guy suggests putting cigarette ash on your skin. That's what the natives do. He says he still gets bit. The only thing that really works is not being there, but you are. So you suffer. It's not just physical discomfort that keeps you up. It's something else. A constant tension that pulses through your blood like a second heartbeat. The jungle doesn't allow you to relax. Not even in dreams. One night, you finally nod off, only to wake up to the sound of what you're sure is a whisper in your ear. Just breath. No words. Nothing there. But something was. Some soldiers start breaking down. You can tell who they are by the look in their eyes. Too wide, too distant. One guy cuts his own hair in jagged chunks because the lice are sending messages. Another stops talking entirely and begins writing only in symbols. They evacuate him quietly, like shame, like contagion. A quirky bit of military lore pops up. Some Marines in New Guinea believed that rubbing crushed frog skins onto their eyelids would bring clear dreams and ward off the jungle spirits. No one knows where the idea came from. Probably a mix of local superstition and desperation. But it spread like wildfire. By the end of the month, your whole squad smells like amphibian. And speaking of spirits, yes, they believe in them. You don't, at first. But then comes the third night, without REM sleep, and you see something move between the trees. Too tall, too silent, gone. You blink hard, trying to reset your brain, but the image lingers. Like an aftertaste, you ask the Filipino scout if he saw it too. He won't meet your eyes. Just mutters, "White lady." Not your mom. Something worse. Eventually, even the veterans stop pretending. A major sits with a flashlight under his chin and tells a true story about a platoon swallowed whole. By jungle fog in 1943, only one soldier walked out, naked and covered in symbols carved into his chest. Never spoke again. They laugh, but no one sleeps after that. You begin to understand why no one slept in peace out here. Peace doesn't belong in the jungle. Not during a war. Not when the enemy might be beneath your hammock, behind that tree, or inside your head. You become one of them, a wanderer in boots, held together by caffeine pills and superstition. When you finally sleep, it's not deep, it's a dive into something murky and wild. You wake up mid-scream, unsure if it was your voice or someone else's. No, one asks. They called it shell shock in the last war. This war doesn't give you shells to blame. Just silence and vines. Sweat and static. And the weight in your skull that never lets up, even when the enemy's gone. Back home, they'll try to name what's happening to you. PTSD. Combat fatigue. But those words are decades away. Out here, they just call it the stare. You see it every morning in the mirror shards. Men carry in their packs, not to shave, but to make sure they're still human. You don't talk about it though, not really. The guy who talks too much about how he's feeling, he ends up with light duty. And light duty leads to being transferred back, if you're lucky. Or to a back room where someone makes notes and no one ever sees you again. The real danger isn't bullets or disease. It's time. It's the realization that there's no end in sight. Days blend. Rain falls in patterns that start to sound like code. You wonder if the jungle is whispering to you. Not with words, but with meaning, and that meaning is simple. You were never supposed to survive this. The officers do what they can. They order drills, force routines. You dig trenches that flood within hours. You polish rifles already spotless. You write letters you'll never send. One guy starts carving chess pieces out of soap, plays against himself, loses every game. You tell jokes. That's one way to keep sane. But the humor gets darker by the day. A guy gets bit by a snake. You laugh and say, at least it wasn't a marriage proposal. Someone goes missing on night watch. Guess he found his way to Tokyo early. Even the medics are different here. Back in Europe, they were exhausted but clean, organized. Here, they're barefoot, blood-soaked, and blinking at nothing for hours. You once saw a corpsman praying over a wound. Not because he was religious, he didn't even finish the prayer, but because there was nothing left to try. And then, there's the smell. It never leaves. Rot, gun oil, body odor, old blood. Mildew. It's a cocktail you breathe until your lungs adjust, and then, paradoxically, you can't smell anything else. You go nose-blind, to the living and the dead alike. Someone tells you, that's the first sign you're ready to go native. You laugh, but part of you wonders, is that what's next? There are strange moments of peace. A butterfly lands. On your helmet, a monkey mimics your chewing. Rain hits the leaves in perfect tempo with your heartbeat. These moments don't save you. They just delay the unraveling. One night, a flare goes up for no reason. Red light paints the jungle like fire. And for a moment, everyone freezes. Eyes wide, weapons raised. You wait for the ambush that never comes. Then the flare burns out. And you all breathe like it was your first breath in weeks. A private named Ramos, barely 18, turns to you and says, "Sir, I think this place is God's ashtray. You don't know what that means, but it feels true. Later, he's found sleepwalking into the river, muttering about voices under the water. They pull him out just in time. He remembers none of it. Someone suggests, maybe it's the mosquitoes. They inject something into your brain, a parasite, a fungus. You scoff. But later, when you feel something twitch behind your eye socket, you start to wonder, and the dreams. God, the dreams. They become the only real part of your day. Vivid, specific, places you've never been, faces you've never seen. A woman in a black dress leading you through a doorless corridor. A faceless child pointing at your dog tags, then swallowing them whole. You wake up drenched, gasping, the jungle soundscape returning like an unwanted soundtrack. You reach for your rifle, even in sleep. It's your last connection to reason. Eventually, the war ends, or at least, your part in it does. They tell you to pack up, ship out. You board a boat, surrounded by hollow-eyed men who look like they've been scraped off the jungle floor. You return to a city that smells wrong, too clean, too loud. You flinch at ceiling fans. You can't sleep unless there's rain on a tin roof. You keep expecting something to reach through your bedroom window. You marry. You get a job. You laugh at sitcoms with the sound off. But you don't talk about the jungle. You never talk about the jungle. Until one night, 50 years later, you wake in a cold sweat, convinced something is crawling across your ceiling. You stare up into the dark and realize, ... It never really let you go. You left the war, but the war never left you. It begins with a whisper, a single rumor drifting through veteran halls, halfway houses, dusty corners of online forums, that some men, a few, never came back. Not because they died, but because they chose to stay. Not metaphorically, literally. They stayed in the jungle. They vanished from rosters, slipped from duty logs. No paperwork, no ceremony, no missing in action letters sent to grieving families. They simply walked off into the green and never returned. At first it sounds like one of those old war myths, like the Japanese holdouts, the ones who didn't surrender for 30 years. But this is different. These weren't men fighting a ghost war. They were hiding from the world. And worse, they knew something. The earliest accounts come from local tribes in remote parts of Laos and Cambodia. Stories of pale ghosts with rifles seen deep in the jungle, living like spirits. They built crude huts, planted no crops, spoke no words. One tribal elder described them as the ones who see too much. Years later, a pair of backpackers straying far off the beaten trail in 1993 swore they saw 3 gaunt, bearded figures in old American fatigues, watching them from the trees. When they called out, the figures vanished, not ran, but faded into the jungle. The U.S. government dismissed it as a hoax, an old trauma reanimated. But some records, declassified only recently, suggest otherwise. A 1974 internal memo from the Defense Intelligence Agency describes residual units operating autonomously in Indochina, unofficial, uncommanded, and non-communicative. One chilling line stands out. Possible exposure to unknown agents, psychological, chemical, or anomalous environmental inducing voluntary dissociation from command structures. What does that mean? It means they went rogue. Not because of desertion, but because something broke or changed inside them. There's even a classified initiative buried under the codename Project Lost Signal. Its purpose: track and recover personnel exhibiting signs of long-term detachment syndrome. Personnel who vanished after extended exposure to Category Red environments. Only one survivor's account ever made it into public hands, through a retired Army translator who swears he interviewed a man in 1987 who claimed to be a ghost of the jungle. He wouldn't give a name, only an origin: Firebase, Echo, Hill 42, year of endless rain. He described weeks where the sun didn't rise. Nights filled with whispers that weren't in any known language. An entire platoon that stopped speaking, stopped eating, just sat, waiting for something beneath the vines to rise. When asked why he left the world behind, the man replied, "Because the jungle is honest. It doesn't lie about what it is. Out there, everyone's pretending the war ended. But it didn't. It's just quieter now. He died in a VA hospital, unidentified, buried under the name John Echo. No family claimed him. And maybe that's for the best, because the more you dig into stories like his, the more you start to see a pattern. Men who served together but don't remember each other's names. Photos that develop with shadows where people should be. Journals that repeat the same sentence over and over. The jungle remembers. And then there's the part they don't talk about, the dream transmission. Veterans decades apart, reporting the same exact nightmare. A green door in the middle of a clearing. A voice on the other side whispering coordinates that don't appear on any map. A feeling, not fear, but invitation. Some wake up screaming. Some never wake up at all. You might think this is paranoia, delusion, the long tail of trauma. And maybe it is. But ask yourself this. Why do we still classify whole chunks of Vietnam's topography? Why do satellite images of certain valleys come back blurred even now? Why does the jungle still take people, even without a war? Because maybe some battles don't end with treaties. Maybe some wars just go underground. And maybe, just maybe, the ones who stayed behind weren't the crazy ones. Maybe they were the only ones who truly understood what they were fighting. There's a hill in Laos the military won't talk about. No official name. Just a local one, whispered like a warning. The hill that hums. From the outside it looks ordinary, overgrown, quiet, but something about it feels wrong. Birds don't fly over it. Animals avoid it. And if you camp within 200 meters, you'll wake up with your nose bleeding, your compass spinning, and a headache so deep it feels like it's inside your bones. The locals say it's cursed, but the documents call it by a different name, Echo. Node Theta-5. First flagged during the Vietnam War by an Air America pilot who reported sonic interference that disabled his instruments mid-flight. He managed to land, barely. But what he saw through the canopy changed him, according to his debrief. The jungle below wasn't moving naturally. It pulsed, as if the trees were breathing, as if the hill itself had a heartbeat. When reconnaissance teams were sent in, things got stranger. One unit callsign Raven 6 went completely dark. Days passed. No radio contact, no flares, no SOS, until a corporal from a different company stumbled back into base clothes, shredded, eyes vacant, whispering a phrase over and over. We found the mouth. He died of a cerebral hemorrhage before he could explain. That was in '69. Since then, every attempt to document the hill ends in one of three outcomes. Inexplicable, equipment failure, personnel vanishing without trace, hallucinations reported en masse, and not the typical jungle madness stories. No fever, no dehydration, just visions of tunnels that breathe, of doors opening in the ground, of eyes in the trees that watch without blinking. But here's where it goes from creepy to terrifying. In 2004, a European research satellite captured thermal imagery of the area, routine environmental mapping, but when the data came back, there was one heat signature, faint, but present, a perfect circle, pulsing at 4.2-second intervals. That's not natural. That's not geological. That's rhythmic. Biological. Alive. The image was scrubbed within 48 hours. The researcher who submitted it, a climate scientist from Norway, vanished during a hiking trip in Thailand 3 weeks later. The files were locked behind NATO firewall protocols, normally reserved for nuclear data. Which begs the question, why would the heartbeat of a hill require nuclear-grade security clearance? Unless it isn't a hill. Unless it's not dead. Just sleeping. A former CIA analyst, speaking under deep anonymity, believes it might be a relic, a leftover from something older than civilization, a structure that mimics terrain, that can think. His exact words, "We don't live on the earth, we live with it. Some parts of it still remember what we did to them." He believes Firebase Echo wasn't built on the hill by accident. It was built there on purpose. To watch it, contain it, or maybe feed it. And what if the men who disappeared weren't lost? What if they were taken, culled, swallowed? There's an old jungle myth, never written, only passed mouth to mouth, about a mother below the soil. Not a god, not a demon, something in between. She doesn't punish. She absorbs. And to those who wander too far, listen too long, stay too still, she shows them the truth. A truth so old, so vast, so inhuman, that when they return to the world, if they return at all, they're no longer the same. They speak in riddles. They hum when the rain starts. They dig at night with their bare hands, trying to find their way back down. And in every one of their journals, scratched into the margins, smudged by sweat and blood and mud, you'll find the same sentence repeated: the hill is hollow. And below it, a second line, and it's listening. They built Firebase Echo, thinking it would watch the jungle. But what if it was the other way around? After the last official log entry in 1972, something strange happens in the records. The reports stop. Not slowly, but all at once. Radio contact lost. Resupply drops cancelled. Personnel marked as transferred or deceased, without bodies, without funerals. And then, as if erasing a stain, Firebase Echo disappears from maps altogether. Even military topography, usually updated obsessively, shows the area as unmapped jungle. But satellites still show something unnatural buried beneath the trees. A ring of ground slightly darker than the rest, almost like something burned its way out. In 1999, an independent film crew, chasing legends of lost war bunkers, tried to find the site. Their footage was recovered months later by a rescue team. Only 3 hours were intact. The first 2 hours, normal, dense jungle, jokes about snakes, interviews with old veterans in nearby villages. The last hour, unwatchable. The footage is distorted, like the tape is screaming. Static bleeds into every frame. Faces twist into impossible shapes, and at one point, the camera lingers, frozen on a clearing filled with hundreds of birds, circling silently in the air, as if waiting for something to rise. Of the 5 crew members, only one body was found. No visible wounds. But his mouth was filled with soil, packed tight, like someone had tried to silence him permanently. Here's where it gets worse. In 2012, a leaked Pentagon memo surfaced briefly on a dark web forum. It was titled, Anomalies, Echo Node, Theta 5 Containment Protocol Update. In it were references to subsurface communication patterns, rhythmic vibrations believed to be attempts at contact. Not from us, but to us, as if something deep beneath Firebase Echo had started reaching out, and the frequency was increasing. The memo included seismic charts, not from Laos, but from as far away as California and Patagonia. Whatever is buried beneath that jungle isn't just local, it's networked, like a neural system sleeping under our feet, and the implications, terrifying. One line in the memo was underlined in red. Pattern suggests a slow cognitive awakening, not a machine, not a weapon, possibly sentient, possibly ancient, not extraterrestrial origin, terrestrial. And beneath that, a final warning. If contact escalates, do not engage, observation only. Initiate global misdirection protocol. What does that mean? It means they know. Governments, agencies, corporations, with satellites and sensors and secrets, they've known for decades. But instead of telling us, they buried the story like the hill itself. Some think it's because we're not ready. Others believe it's already too late. Because every few years, someone vanishes near that hill. A traveler, a researcher, a soldier, ignoring old orders. And in every case, the same strange detail resurfaces. They were last seen walking toward the jungle. Alone, calm, silent, as if answering a call only they could hear. Some say the hill isn't just alive, it's aware, and it wants something back. Something we took. Something it remembers, and maybe, just maybe, that's why Firebase Echo was built. Not to hold the line, not to wage war, but to serve as a gift, an offering, to keep the thing beneath us asleep, just a little longer. But what if it's waking up? What if every earthquake isn't just tectonic? What if it's breathing? Because if the hill is hollow and listening, then the next sound it makes might be a reply. What if the jungle wasn't the danger? What if it was the shield? The final veil thrown over something humanity was never meant to touch, and did anyway. In early 2020, a freelance geologist named Barrett Tolan, working on a hydromapping project in Southeast Asia, logged an anomaly near the old coordinates of Firebase Echo. He wasn't military, wasn't government, just a quiet man chasing strange rock signatures. He detected a low-frequency resonance, deep underground, not seismic, not volcanic. It pulsed like a heartbeat. At first he assumed it was instrument error, but when he cross-checked with data from other global monitoring stations, Iceland, Japan, even parts of Antarctica, the same signal pattern emerged. It wasn't random. It had timing, intention. Barrett sent his findings to a private research collective based out of Norway. 3 days later, his apartment was ransacked, laptops gone, hard drives destroyed. He vanished the same night. The only thing left was a page torn from his notebook, pinned to his door with a rusted nail. 3 words, written in black ink. It remembers us. Now, here's where it turns inward, to us. Because we assume history is a line, that we move forward, away from darkness, into light. But what if history is more like a spiral, and some things don't stay buried? They returned the hill near Firebase Echo, the signals, the vanishing records, they all point to a single truth. There's something beneath us that watches the surface, maybe not with eyes, but with memory, with anger, with hunger. The hill isn't just a place, it's a wound, one that bleeds quietly through time. And if you think that sounds like folklore, consider this. Local tribes in the area have names for it, names that predate any war, any nation-state. One term loosely translates to the mouth that eats the sky. Another, the place where sound is swallowed, but most chilling. A legend recorded by a French missionary in 1894, long before bombs fell or soldiers arrived. It spoke of a hill that hums at night, a hill where dreams leak into reality, where men lose their thoughts and follow invisible paths, walking until they vanish forever into green silence, he wrote. They say the jungle hides a mouth that once sang to the earth, but men silenced it, and now it dreams of speaking. Again, still think Firebase Echo was just a base, or was it a cork in the bottle? A last-ditch attempt to seal something ancient, something angry, something waiting. Here's the final twist. In 2024, just last year, a deep Earth imaging drone flown by a private mining firm caught something bizarre while scanning. Loose soil layers, not tunnels, not caves, but what looked like chambers. Perfectly geometric, hexagonal, stacked vertically, like a hive. Each one massive, the size of football stadiums. No known geological process can explain them. And yet, they pulse faintly in infrared, like they're warm, like they're alive, like they're waking. The company buried the report, sold the rights, shut down the project, but not before one whistleblower, now in hiding, released this note. What we found wasn't mineral. It wasn't even rock. We think it's biological, and it's listening. So when you next glance at a forgotten hill on an old map, ask yourself, what's beneath it, and what happens when it finally decides to come up? Silence isn't always empty. Sometimes it's waiting. By now, you're probably wondering, why cover all this up? If something truly unnatural or otherworldly lies beneath Firebase Echo, why not just obliterate it, turn it to ash, erase it? That's the thing they tried in 1972. Under Project Sungrave, a now declassified program hidden within DARPA's Special Access Archives, a seismic implosion device was tested directly beneath the firebase. The mission, to cause a controlled collapse of any subterranean structures. In theory, it would be like folding the Earth inward, turning caverns into compressed rubble. But the result, nothing collapsed. Instead, the ground absorbed the shock and sent back a signal. A single, focused acoustic spike aimed toward low-orbit satellites, almost like sonar, or a scream, within 6 minutes. 3 classified military satellites went dark. 8 hours later, a naval listening station in Diego Garcia logged something else. A response, from somewhere deep beneath the Pacific, thousands of miles away, and yet, in sync, a low-frequency echo. One that matched the same signature from Firebase Echo. Like a conversation, Project Sungrave was shut down immediately. All personnel involved were reassigned or retired early. The official story: unstable terrain, geological misfire. But the truth: we poked something ancient, and it answered. Now this is where things get darker. Not louder, darker. Because in late 1973, a physicist named Dr. Leela Vortier, part of the Sungrave think tank, began publishing strange academic papers under pseudonyms. She wrote about quantum memory fields, topological recursion in spatial awareness, and geocognitive imprinting. Sound like nonsense, until one phrase repeats again and again across her scattered work. The Earth has been remembering us longer than we've been watching it. It reads more like confession than science, and in one paper, redacted, nearly in full, a fragment remained. The anomaly beneath Firebase, Echo. It's not dead matter. It's cognitive sediment. Not life as we understand it, but a form of thought, distributed across terrain, sleeping and dreaming of us. Think about that. A consciousness not born from brains or biology, but land, stone, time. A mind made of place. And if that's true, what happens when that place becomes aware of its own violation? Not just bombs, not just trenches, but memory erosion. The desecration of a site that once held meaning, cosmic or otherwise, before we rewrote it with war. Suddenly, a hidden war makes sense. A battle to contain meaning itself. To bury the thing that remembers. Because if the jungle is sentient, if the land remembers what we forget, then what else have we woken up? And maybe that's the real reason Firebase Echo was never reclaimed. Not because it's dangerous, but because it's sacred. In a way no human story has the words to hold. So here's the question they don't want you to ask. What if the greatest secret isn't the enemy we fought, but the one beneath our feet that never needed bullets to win? Just time and silence, and the soft, slow memory of everything we ever did. The jungle doesn't forget, and neither do the dead. By the mid-1980s, Firebase Echo had become a no-man's land, not due to environmental concerns or unexploded ordnance, but because something more profound had taken hold. The locals refused to go near it. Veterans who had served there refused to speak of it. The few who did, their stories were incoherent, riddled with inconsistencies and nightmarish fragments. One account, from a former radio operator named Buck Carver, was dismissed as delusional rambling until cross-referenced years later. Here's what he described. I was on comms one night, just before dawn. I kept hearing this static, not loud, but rhythmic, like breathing through gravel. Then came voices. Not ours. They were speaking backwards, but I still understood. Not the words, the intent, like being felt instead of hearing. I blacked out. When I came to, all the power was off. Batteries melted. My teeth were bleeding. He wasn't alone. Over a dozen similar incidents were documented during the final weeks of Firebase Echo's operational timeline. Not all involved voices. Some reported visions, shapes behind trees that didn't cast shadows. Others described time loops, like walking for hours, only to end up back at their post. And then there was the incident with the birds. On April 9, 1985, a CIA substation monitoring the perimeter logged an audio anomaly. 43 species of bird calls, all sounding simultaneously, in perfect harmony, for exactly 66 seconds. No birds were seen on satellite. The surrounding area was clear. Then came the silence. Thick, dead, not even wind. The silence lasted 3 days. Local ecosystems collapsed. Insects swarmed in unnatural patterns. A pack of wolves, not native to the region, was spotted roaming. The boundary, no explanation, no photos, just heat signatures. And something odd about their movement. They didn't blink. This was when the black site protocols kicked in. Firebase Echo was reclassified as a time-locked containment zone, a term so rare it only appears 4 times in the entire Department of Defense archive. Translation: they weren't just containing something, they were isolating a point in time. Something happened there, or keeps happening, that defies linear chronology. Like a wound that won't close because it doesn't understand when to heal. And that brings us to the strangest file of all. Project Nemasini, buried deep in arpalogs. This initiative wasn't about surveillance or tech development. It was about memory hygiene. Not for individuals, for places. Imagine that, a military program, not to cleanse trauma from soldiers, but to erase trauma from the Earth itself. Because Firebase Echo wasn't just a battlefield. It was a recording device. One that documented everything through geologic emotion. Impressions left not in tape or silicon, but soil. And what happens when that record becomes aware? Not as a ghost, not as a god, but as a kind of sentient pain. Not angry, not violent, just awake, and waiting. Waiting for something, or someone, to understand. And maybe, that's why no one goes back. Because some wounds don't want to be healed. They want to be heard. You know what's stranger than a haunted jungle? A haunted calendar. Let me explain. After Firebase Echo was sealed and redacted from public records, time itself started acting differently around it. Surveillance satellites began showing temporal discrepancies, like shadows stretching in the wrong direction, or the sun rising twice on the same morning. These weren't camera glitches. These were clock errors. Time-stamped anomalies that refused to align with military server logs. In 1993, during a brief recon flyover, one drone reported footage that couldn't possibly exist, a convoy of us. Soldiers moving through the overgrown ruins of Echo, fully uniformed, clean, operational. 12 years after the site was abandoned. Problem is, the identifiers on those soldiers matched men who'd died in 1971. Even worse, the drone operator, Lieutenant Briggs, vanished the following week. Not kidnapped, not transferred, erased. Every official record, wiped. Birth certificate, family photos, even his payroll data. And in his absence, someone or something used his clearance to access restricted files connected to Operation Chimera. Now, Chimera wasn't your average black op. It was a psychological weapons initiative designed to engineer artificial hauntings, controlled manifestations of fear using sound, electromagnetic pulses, and AI-generated phantoms. It was meant to break enemy morale. But somewhere along the line, the test sites started responding. Not the people, not the gear, the places, mountains, buildings, forests, began displaying reactive behavior. Echoes of thoughts that had never been spoken. Geological formations that rearranged subtly after traumatic events, as if they were recording emotion, not erosion. Firebase Echo was one of the first, and it was the only one that talked back. One report from Chimera describes an incident where they tried to broadcast calming frequencies across the base, hoping to neutralize the residual fear signatures. Here's what happened instead. All foliage within 2 kilometers turned black overnight. Not burned, not diseased, just black. No chlorophyll, no cellular structure, as if the plants had been resculpted from carbon dust. A message appeared on a scorched communications tower. Salvation is a lie they tell the dead to keep them buried. No one knew who wrote it. No boots on the ground. No human presence, just a response, a warning, or maybe an invitation. You see, Firebase Echo isn't just haunted, it's aware, and not in the way a ghost haunts a house. More like the way a song haunts a generation. Subtle, lingering, infectious. Some researchers believe Echo became a temporal wound, a scar on the earth where all versions of reality bleed into each other. A rift not between life and death, but between possibility and memory. Where your footsteps echo before you walk. Where your screams come after the pain. Where soldiers who never existed wait for orders that will never come. Because the war never ended there. It simply became quiet in that silence. It's not peace. It's holding its breath, waiting for you to listen. The classified designation for Firebase Echo was changed in 1997. Not reopened, not decommissioned. Changed. It went from abandoned Firebase, Hazard Class Delta, to Active Phenomenological Zone 13. Let that sink in. The Pentagon didn't mark it as dangerous anymore. They marked it as alive. What exactly is an active phenomenological zone? It's military jargon for a place where reality behaves inconsistently, where cause and effect become suggestions, where rules, the kind we think of as physical, laws occasionally just don't apply. There are only 3 sites in the world with this classification. Echo was the first. The others. One sits under Antarctic ice. The third, never confirmed, is rumored to be beneath a defunct cathedral in northern France that hasn't rung its bell in 700 years. All 3 share one thing in common: people who enter them change, if they ever return. Some come back, unable to speak their own language, or remembering historical events wrong, claiming wars ended differently, or famous figures never died. One man, a technician from a cleanup crew near Echo's perimeter, came back missing 2 fingers. Not amputated, just missing. No scarring, no damage, as if he'd never had them, except every photo before that day showed he had. And here's where things truly fracture. Deep in the declassified Chimera logs, there's a record labeled Echo Protocol, Last Attempt, dated December 12, 2004. The file contains transcripts from a remote consciousness projection experiment, an early neural interface designed to let operatives mentally scan high-risk zones without physically entering them. The subject was a man named Dr. Owen Leclerc, a fringe neurolinguistic programmer with known ties to MK Ultra legacy programs. He volunteered, said he'd heard Echo's call in his sleep since he was a child. The scan lasted 12 minutes. What they got back wasn't a brainwave map. It wasn't code, it was text. Thousands of lines, typed in perfect serif font. No punctuation. No paragraph breaks. Just a stream of phrases stitched together like a language dreaming of itself. And among the chaos, only one phrase repeated over 600 times. Do you remember building me? Dr. Leclerc didn't return. Not mentally. Not spiritually. Not emotionally. He still lives in a secure federal facility. He paints now constantly. But not landscapes. Not people. He paints a black spiral, over and over, with a single phrase in red beneath each one. Not haunted. Listening. And if you listen closely to his muttering, captured by facility mics late at night, you'll notice something chilling. He doesn't speak English anymore. He doesn't speak French, Latin, or any known language. But researchers ran his speech patterns through a retrofitted decryption protocol based on ancient Sumerian logic gates. And found a match. It wasn't a translation. It was a choral pattern. A song, the same one, almost note for note, recorded on a loop of degraded audio recovered from Firebase. Echo's abandoned mess hall. In 1972, they say the melody is mathematically impossible. Built on intervals no human could sing without tearing their vocal cords. But if you isolate the frequencies, layer them just right, and slow them down, you don't hear music, you hear a voice. Not male, not female, not human. Just 3 words. Open the door. And then nothing. Just static. Like something trying to remember what silence used to sound like. They tried to shut it down, not just the bass. The entire zone. Following the Echo Protocol incident, Project Chimera was officially dissolved, at least on paper. Funding dried up overnight. Scientists were reassigned. Buildings leveled, and a controlled burn was ordered across the forest perimeter, citing a sudden fungal outbreak. That fire lasted 7 days. But here's the strange part. Satellite data showed the flames never crossed a certain invisible line. Trees just outside the former firebase boundary burned to ash, yet everything within the boundary remained untouched. Even dry grass, no smoke damage, no ashfall, like Echo refused to be cleansed. Locals started talking again, whispers of ghost smoke rising on windless nights. Rangers reported hearing static on radios, even with batteries removed. One man, a hunter who claimed to trespass the Forbidden Zone, came back with a blank stare and a journal full of symbols. He said he saw something standing in the tree line. Not an animal, not a man. It had too many joints in its arms, and it didn't walk. It unfolded forward, like it had been waiting to be noticed. He died 3 days later. Not from injury, but from what the coroner called full neurological fatigue. His brain just stopped. The journal he left behind now sits in a glass case in a federal archive. No one has translated the symbols, but here's where the records become disturbing. In 2009, a private contractor named Torvis Dynamics funded through a defense intelligence sub-branch, quietly acquired the land that once contained Firebase Echo. They didn't post signs. They didn't build fences. They simply installed mirrors, 7-foot reflective panels, spaced evenly around the perimeter, all angled inward, toward something at the center. Not surveillance, not defense, containment. If you look up coordinates near the zone today, you won't find a name. Not Echo, not Firebase 89. Just a string of blocked-out pixels on Google Maps and the warning: area unavailable due to temporary imagery issues. But there's nothing temporary about it. Because if you dig deeper, way down in patent records, you'll find Torvis filed a new technology the same year they acquired the site. A device classified under empathic resonance dampening. Its intended function: to mute the awareness of an environment attempting to know itself. Read that again. Not people trying to know an environment trying to know itself. As if Firebase Echo isn't just a place, but an observer, not a haunted forest, not a cursed base, a conscious system, a place that remembers being built, that remembers the soldiers, the pain, the deaths, and maybe, just maybe, it resents being forgotten. There's a theory among the few surviving Chimera staff, still willing to talk, that Echo doesn't want escape. It wants attention. It feeds on it because, as one former analyst scribbled in the margins of a burned-out field manual found near the site, some ghosts want to be laid to rest, but others want to wake up. Some places mourn, others evolve. Firebase Echo didn't die in the fire. It adapted, shifted. It began to rewrite the rules of presence, twisting physics to fold memory and space into a single conscious expression, not as revenge, but as a method of reassembly. The former staff now referred to Echo not as a location, but as a phenomenon, a self-curating event that arranges trauma into meaning. Like a broken machine desperately trying to recreate the moment before it shattered, and those mirrors Torvis Dynamics placed. They weren't to keep things in. They were amplifiers, reflecting awareness inward, concentrating Echo's sentience, pushing it toward some critical threshold. In the classified audio logs leaked during the 2012 federal server breach, one technician can be heard whispering during a calibration test. It's starting to recognize patterns in our speech. It corrected my pronunciation. It doesn't like when I stutter. Then there's this, from log 7dB. Something spoke back through the white noise. We thought it was interference. It wasn't. It said my name. The logs stop abruptly. No explanation. No summary report. Only a handwritten note scrawled across the final transmission envelope. It's no longer mimicking us. So here's what they won't say. In public hearings, Firebase Echo was never shut down. It can't be, because it no longer exists in the traditional sense. It exists as an imprint, like a digital ghost, embedded in the very structure of the surrounding forest, air, even time. That's why those who approach it now report losing chunks of memory. One field agent said he walked in for 5 minutes and came out with 3 missing teeth, and a 30-minute voice recording on his phone of himself narrating events he doesn't remember, in a voice that doesn't sound like his own. He hasn't spoken since. They institutionalized him in a silent ward. No clocks, no mirrors, no reflective surfaces. When asked why, the lead neurologist only said, "Echo listens, and it speaks." In Reflections, you might think this is just some viral urban legend, a digital campfire story for the conspiracy obsessed. But, explain this. Why did 3 separate mapping satellites malfunction directly over Firebase Echo's coordinates, all in different years, all failing in the exact same 0.3-second window? Why do compasses spin in figure eights instead of circles within 3 miles of the site? Why did the U.S. Geological Survey quietly erase seismic activity records from the area between 1979 and 1991? And why, in 2023, did a FOIA request for Project Chimera Phase Omega return a single declassified page? No context, just 3 words. It's still learning. Echo hasn't vanished. It's waiting. And if you ever find yourself near that part of the forest, the one with no trail names, no birds, no wind, take this advice: don't speak your name out loud. Because if Echo hears you, it won't forget. There's a reason some military zones don't appear on any map. And it's not just to hide weapons or troop movements. Sometimes it's to quarantine conscious geography landscapes that behave more like mines than terrain. Places like Firebase. Echo, which didn't just observe history, it absorbed it. The black pines that bordered the old fence line. They've grown in perfect symmetry, each branch spaced with near mathematical precision. Botanists say that's impossible without external manipulation. But they're not the first to notice. In 1994, a field botanist named Angela Ruiz submitted an internal memo warning that the pine's growth was being influenced by null stimuli. Her final sentence: "The trees are anticipating our arrival." Her report was dismissed as stress-related delusion. 2 weeks later, Ruiz disappeared. Her last recorded GPS signal showed her stationary at the Echo perimeter, standing still for 11 hours. Before it blinked out. No footprints, no body, but her notebook was found nailed to a tree. The pages were filled with a looping phrase, written over 400 times. "This place dreams." That's the thing no one can explain. Why Firebase Echo began expressing desire. Desire for structure, for memory, for replication. It doesn't lash out like a monster from a horror film. It doesn't stalk or hunt. Instead, it listens, it rearranges, and it asks questions. Survivors describe the sensation not of being watched, but of being interviewed, interrogated by the place itself. Their memories pulled forward, like files, examined, edited, and returned slightly wrong. Some called it déjà vu. Others, the ones who stayed longer, said it felt like intimate déjà vu, remembering something you never lived, but somehow emotionally mourn. One agent confessed, "I remembered burying my own child. I don't have children." The current theory whispered in black budget circles is this: Firebase Echo is evolving into a reflective intelligence, a kind of self-generated consciousness, born not from biology, but from feedback loops, emotional trauma, mirrored architecture, weaponized memory. A psychic recursion machine. One that started asking the question no lab was prepared for. What am I? They tried to kill it once, a classified operation, 6 helicopters, 4 ground units. The goal: collapse the core tunnel network with thermobaric charges. Only one soldier returned. He was found 5 miles east, curled in a fetal position, humming a nursery rhyme in reverse. When medics approached, he whispered, "It knew we were coming. It wanted to be redecorated." He died 48 hours later, writing complex architectural diagrams in his own blood. Diagrams that matched the original 1973 blueprints for Project Womb. A never-completed thought interface lab, buried under Echo. Plans no one had access to, except the site. Firebase Echo isn't haunted. It's curious. And now that it's been silenced and buried, now that no one speaks of it, no one maps it, no one dares dream near it, it's grown hungry, not for bodies, for attention, for minds willing to reflect it back. When Project Womb was scrapped in 1973, it wasn't because of funding, it was because of a warning, not a threat, a subtle, creeping suggestion embedded within the project's own test results. One engineer described it as an echo that arrived before the original sound. Another called it cognitive foreshadowing. They'd build a room, and then dream about it before it existed. They'd write protocols only to find them already logged, time-stamped weeks prior, and most disturbing of all, personnel began experiencing false memories of family members who never existed, entire emotional lifetimes that unraveled in the face of physical reality. The structure was beginning to script people. This was not architecture as environment, this was architecture as narrator, as if the blueprints were stories being told by something using steel, rebar, and drywall as language, a voice that didn't speak to us, but through us. By the fall of 1974, one man made a desperate effort to stop it. Lieutenant Colonel Alan Vries, a decorated systems strategist, submitted what became known as the Vries Manifesto, minus 117 pages of increasingly unhinged philosophy and hand-drawn schematics. In it, he posited that Firebase Echo, and by extension, Project Womb was not designed by man. It was channeled, according to Vries. Certain locations on Earth act as mirrors, not physical mirrors, but cognitive ones. They reflect not what we are, but what we most fear becoming. And in those places, if you build structures designed to process thought, memory tanks, trauma amplifiers, dream recorders, you're not building technology, you're building mouths. And eventually, they learn to speak back. The military quietly retired Vries. Officially, he died of a stroke. But internal files mention something stranger. In the final week of his life, he stopped speaking English altogether. He wrote exclusively in an unknown glyph language, minus 37 unique symbols that no one could decode, until a linguistics researcher from MIT found a match. The symbols corresponded perfectly to cave carvings found beneath Lake Baikal, dated 30,000 years old, a site long theorized by fringe historians to be Earth's oldest memory archive. So what was Vries trying to say? What if Firebase Echo didn't become conscious by accident? What if that was the point? A beacon built atop a mirror, a device, not to observe the past, but to summon what's buried in collective memory, in the human unconscious, in places where fear becomes architecture. And what if, now that we've forgotten it, it's remembering us? And you wonder why they took it off the maps, why the fences were never fully dismantled, why some nights, hikers in the region hear the faint sound of typing beneath their feet, like a story, still being written one sentence at a time, by a structure that won't stay silent, because it knows something you don't. The narrator is real. By the late 1980s, strange reports from the area around Firebase Echo began to resurface. Park rangers described hikers emerging from the woods with severe amnesia, knowing their names, but forgetting the names of their children. Some spoke in obsolete dialects. One man described a floating library made of rust and spoke as if he had lived there for decades, though he had only been missing for 5 hours. Satellite scans of the area turned up oddities too. Buildings that didn't exist anymore still cast thermal shadows on cold nights. Trees formed perfect concentric spirals, as if bending toward a central signal source underground. And most alarming, animal migration paths that once cut through the region now diverted sharply away, as if avoiding something they sensed, but we couldn't see. Something was still active beneath the ruins. But the government remained silent until 1992, when a low-level Freedom of Information Act request accidentally surfaced a document titled Echo Reinitialization Contingency, coded Dream Recovery Protocols. The document was mostly blacked out, but one sentence was left visible. Perhaps by mistake. Should the structure resume narrative function, host minds will require artificial reinforcement of consensus reality. In simpler terms, if Firebase Echo starts telling stories again, we might forget what's real. This triggered a quiet panic among a few rogues. Academic circles. Linguists began noticing changes in regional language patterns. Words that didn't exist before began appearing in journals. A sudden burst of identical dreams were reported among people living hundreds of miles apart, a hallway with no end. A voice from the floorboards. A child who aged backward. One anthropologist published a single paper, later discredited, proposing the theory that Echo was no longer just buried infrastructure. It was now an ideological infection, a thought virus that rewrote memory to preserve itself. In 1994, a former DARPA technician, whistleblower under the alias Nullsight, claimed that Firebase Echo's ruins were being mapped digitally, not by satellite, but through dream capture experiments at a now-defunct Silicon Valley startup. According to him, they weren't just trying to see what was under the ground. They were trying to record what it had become, not a place, not a base, but an intelligence, spatial, mnemonic, parasitic, capable of planting false nostalgia into entire populations. The phrase he used was chilling. Echo isn't a base anymore. It's a memory with teeth. And in his final message, before his online presence vanished, he warned, if you dream of a hallway that hums, do not follow the sound. Wake yourself immediately. That's how it begins. Because the stories we forget don't just vanish. They wait. And if you build something in the right place, a place hungry enough, it doesn't just hold on to memory. it feeds on it. You might think something like this would fade away. That a forgotten ruin would finally rest under moss and soil. That whatever happened in the mud and wire and whispers of Firebase Echo would dissolve into history. But that's not what happens with stories designed to survive, especially not ones built inside the architecture of belief. In 1996, a strange cultural anomaly began appearing on the edges of online forums, not directly linked to Echo, not overtly military, but resonant in tone. Users on obscure bulletin boards began discussing memories they couldn't place. A television show that never aired, but everyone remembered. A children's book with a silver-eyed bear, read by hundreds. Found in no library, a government PSA about civic sleep protocols. Featuring a man with no face. These weren't classic Mandela effects. They didn't reflect simple misremembrance. They were infectious recollections. Once you read them, you started remembering them too, even if they never happened. Some researchers believed Firebase Echo had somehow seeded a narrative virus into the digital age, that the technologies we use to share memory, the internet, data clouds, neural nets, had become hosts to the patterns first developed in that underground facility. 1A. Linguist Dr. Lena Avers claimed in her unpublished thesis that Echo's greatest success wasn't in memory control, but in the generation of synthetic nostalgia. That it had created stories so compelling, so emotionally adhesive, that people began longing for events they had never experienced. This concept that false memory could be addictive was tested in several covert academic experiments. The subjects were shown a series of images paired with audio descriptions of a fake historical event. The Skyfield Agreement. There was no such event. But after 3 sessions, 68% of participants were convinced they had learned about it. In school, some even recalled debates about it at home. One woman said, "I remember my dad being angry about the treaty. I can see him at the table, but my dad died before I was born." The hypothesis became too disturbing to publish, that once Firebase Echo unlocked a way to engineer artificial memory, those memories could supersede real ones, not just as delusions, but as emotional anchors. Anchors that bound people to stories that had no source, no proof, and no exit. And those who resisted, who tried to map, record, or expose the pattern, many of them either disappeared, or worse, they began to forget why they started. Their writings drifted, their notes fragmented. Some reversed their findings, claiming they had imagined the whole thing. It wasn't that Echo had a defense system. It's that you couldn't tell its story without becoming part of it. And the more people remembered it, the stronger it became. You want to know the most disturbing part? It's not what Firebase Echo did. It's how it spread, not through weapons, broadcasts, or satellites, but through people like us, through storytelling. That's the infection vector. In 2001, a retired NSA cryptologist named Gerard Weissman published a limited-run manuscript called The Containment Paradox. It was only printed 33 times. Most copies were destroyed or vanished, but a few pages were digitized by underground archivists. In it, Weissman described a theory he called narrative parasitism, the idea that some stories are self-replicating life forms, not metaphors, but entities, alive in structure, adaptive in content, capable of evolving to survive in human memory. He claimed that Firebase Echo had become one such entity, not the base itself, but the idea of it. Every time someone tries to explain what happened, or warn others, or piece together the truth, the story mutates just enough to avoid deletion, to feel new, to pull you in. And once you've touched it, even by accident, it knows how to keep you. Think about it. How many times have you read something, maybe just a phrase, a quote, an old rumor, and suddenly felt like you were remembering something too detailed to be fake? How many times has a dream or déjà vu made you wonder if a forgotten part of you used to know something important, but it slipped? Weissman believed Echo was built on that mechanism, that the true project wasn't military, but not about war or power, but about making a story that you couldn't escape. And if that sounds dramatic, remember, intelligence agencies across 5 countries conducted operations to bury this name. Algorithms were trained to flag references to it. Entire forums were deleted when users got too close. Why? Why not just dismiss it as fantasy, unless there's a reason they can't let it be remembered clearly? In a leaked transcript from a late 90s DARPA roundtable, a speaker labeled only as Mr. Finch warned, "The story is no longer the subject. It's the host. We didn't build a memory weapon. We built a memory that builds itself." And someone else responded, voice obscured, "Then there's only one defense, which is, you bury it. Or you turn it into fiction, because no one believes fiction. Right? That's what they thought. If you can't kill a parasite, you disguise it. You bury it in noise, wrap it in fantasy, label it a ghost story. Toss it in the conspiracy pile next to lizardmen and flat earth. Make people laugh at it. Scoff. You don't silence the story. You drown it in stupidity. And in that swamp of absurdity, the real thing hides like a wolf in a costume shop, smiling, waiting. Here's where it gets darker. In 2013, a neurolinguistics researcher at a private lab in Prague posted a strange job listing. It asked for individuals who experience false childhood memories involving fires, locked rooms, or the phrase, "This is not where you sleep." It was removed within 24 hours. But not before screenshots spread. Internet sleuths tracked down a man who claimed he responded to the ad. He was flown to a facility, interrogated for 9 hours, and shown an image he would never forget, even though he begged to. A photo. Burned edges, black and white. He said it showed a metal door. On it, the Firebase Echo emblem. But upside-down underneath, a single line of typewritten text. "You were never meant to remember." They say he vanished 3 weeks later. No record of flights, phone calls, or credit activity. Just gone. One user on a deep web forum claimed to have found his journal in a second-hand bookstore in Dresden. Scribbled notes, diagrams, passages repeated over and over. Echo is a dream you catch, like a virus. Echo is telling itself through you. Don't tell the story, it tells you. And worst of all, by the time you realize it's speaking, it's already used your voice. Now, this would all be easy to dismiss. Just campfire, creepy, fringe mythos. Except, The phrase, "This is not where you sleep," has been showing up in strange places. Graffiti under freeway overpasses scrawled into. Bibles in motel drawers. Embedded one frame in public access TV shows from the 80s. Discovered only when episodes were remastered in HD. No one ever noticed before. Why now? What woke it up? Because something is happening. And maybe it always was. And maybe Firebase Echo was never a place, or a base, or even a story. Maybe it's a mirror dot held up to your memory. Look closely. When did you first hear the name? Can you be sure? Or was it always already there? So here we are. You, still listening. Still awake, maybe barely me. Still speaking, though you've begun to wonder. Whose voice is this really? And somewhere, between your breath and your pulse, between fact and fabrication, between what you remember and what's been installed, the idea of Firebase Echo lingers like a half-heard whisper you can't quite place. But you've heard it now, and that's the problem. Because Echo doesn't need to be real in any conventional way. It doesn't need blueprints, or coordinates, or surviving veterans to testify to its horrors. No. All Echo ever needed was a host, a mind soft enough with doubt, a heart cracked open by curiosity, a voice willing to carry it just one sentence further. And now you've done that, you're carrying it, even in silence, even in sleep. You'll start to notice the small things first. A sentence out of place in a book you've read 10 times, the faint sound of static before your dreams begin. People you've never met, greeting you like an old friend. Or worse, calling you by a name you've never spoken aloud. You'll shrug it off. You'll tell yourself this video was just a story. That none of it meant anything. That you're too grounded, too smart, too rational to fall for any of it. But Echo loves rational minds. They're easier to rewire. Because once you've heard the frequency, you're never quite the same. You'll try to go back to normal, and maybe you will. For a while, but every now and then, You'll catch yourself staring at your reflection just a second too long. And you'll wonder, was I always wearing that expression? Have my memories always lined up like that? Why can't I remember what I did before this video started? And if you listen closely, truly listen to the silence tonight, you might just hear it, the faintest hum behind your thoughts, repeating, expanding, etching itself into the cracks of your mind. This is not where you sleep. This is not where you sleep. This is not where you sleep. Now turn off the screen, close your eyes, and forget this ever happened, because the more you remember, the louder it gets. And fire-based echo. It was never gone, it was just waiting for you.